Hello, I'm Cheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. For 5 weeks every holiday season and several weeks in the spring, New York audiences are gifted with the opportunity to attend performances by the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, one of the most famous modern dance troupes in the world. Since its founding in 1958, the company has performed and conducted classes in more than 70 countries, exploring the African American experience in dance for an estimated 25 million people. Now, Edges of Ailey, on exhibit at the Whitney Museum, is illuminating the life and work of the company's founder and the forces that shaped them. One of the most ambitious shows in the museum's history, it's a chance to understand the man behind Alvin Ailey's vision. And here to help us understand Ailey and his vision is Sylvia Waters, who danced with the principal company for 8 years before assuming leadership of Ailey II, Ailey's second company, for 38 years. Welcome. You know, I went to see Edges of Ailey last week, and I was overwhelmed by it in a good way. Tell me how the exhibit came about.
Well, about 5 years ago, I had a conversation with Adrienne Edwards, who talked about the fact that Ailey had been such a very deep part of her life for so many years, and she was, being the curator at the Whitney, was very excited about doing this exhibit. And I really, at the time, had no idea the scope that she had in mind. And so I know what you mean, overwhelming, when you say that.
There's so many things in it. There are the wonderful posters of the many seasons, and there's artwork showing the influence of music, different kinds of black music on Ailey's dances. I think I saw some sculpture, there's some African art. I think dominating the whole exhibit are the ongoing video
The film
of
footage,
of the dancers and Alvin Ailey themselves.
Yes.
And you see people sitting there just for a long time, as I did, you know, watching those wonderful dance scenes.
It's very immersive.
Yes.
And I mean, each time I see it, I get stuck on one thing. I mean, I will have to return several times to see the exhibit in total. And since I've been working in archives, since stepping down from Ailey II, I certainly have an interest in the history, and I'm always learning and the legacy of Alvin Ailey, not just because I've known him, but hearing it over and over again, what his vision was and how I lived through that time with him as he was bringing his vision to fruition. So
Now, in 1958, when the Alvin Ailey Dance Company was founded, what did the landscape look like for African American dancers?
well, they weren't getting much work in dance channels like on Broadway and in film, and there were so many talented dancers, and Alvin saw this. And the concert world really didn't have that many outlets for them. So it was his idea to choreograph works and work with these dancers. And he was doing a Broadway show, Jamaica, at the time, that starred Lena Horne and Ricardo Montalban. And the dancers in the show would rehearse with him between shows, after shows, before shows, and they rehearsed for months to do this first concert at the YMHA that he shared with Ernest Parham, another Broadway dancer, and to bring these beautiful talents to the stage was a way to, I guess, for audiences to envision themselves. And I was blessed to be at that first performance.
Oh, really?
That premiere, yeah. I was still a student, and I can remember it was really a visceral experience for me because I was so familiar with the music, the blues music, and I somehow just connected with it, seeing this larger in life picture of Black life on the stage.
One writer said of Ailey's, of the dances that the Ailey dancers performed, quote, "Look how beautiful we are. Look how wonderful we are as Black people. Look what's happened to us in all these years, despite our problems, despite our being brought here as slaves. Look what has grown in us." The Alvin Ailey Company was the first modern American dance company that didn't exclusively perform the dances of one choreographer.
Absolutely. He was the first to have a repertory company because at the YMHA, the Kaufman Auditorium, and at Hunter College, you would see all of these wonderful, wonderful works by John Butler, Tally Beatty, Donald McHale, and you know, these are companies that they weren't on a contract. They rehearsed for months and months and months for no pay. And you never knew when you'd see these real masterworks again. And Alvin, for him, he had started touring Southeast Asia through the State Department. And he said, there's no way I can do all of this myself. So he began to invite choreographers to set works on the dancers that he put together as a company. And that's how it started. And it was a very unique idea for many years. He said, after all, the ballet companies do it.
Right.
They do mixed rep.
Right.
Why can't modern dance companies do it? And he did that.
And I guess some of the other modern dance companies did caught on to the idea.
Eventually. It
Yeah.
wasn't until, I mean, recently, really.
So you mentioned the company going on tour. How important was touring for the company?
Very, extremely. I mean, where there weren't enough venues in New York, I mean, there was no way to sustain it where you could dance all year. So touring made it possible not only for the exposure to audiences throughout the United States, throughout the world, really. And it gave a home and a way for these works to be presented. And so Alvin was celebrating the Black experience and the modern dance tradition all over the world.
And it also, well, brought in money for the company, and it also, you know, gave the members of the company work.
Absolutely.
It gave them steady work.
Yes.
And I was looking at, and it was interesting, you know, the company, some of these foreign tours were sponsored by the State Department.
Yes, they were. The first one was Southeast Asia in 1962. The second one, I believe, was in South America in 1963. And it continued. He
Yeah.
went first African World Arts Festival in Senegal in 1966. And it continued to, well, I would say to this day. It's been a while since the company has done a State Department tour.
Okay.
But they were designated ambassadors to the world.
Right, right. How big is the company?
Now 30 dancers.
Okay. And the yearly schedule, I mean, there's always the New York season, which is holiday season, which is 5 weeks. And then what happens after that?
Usually there's a winter tour. And following the winter tour, there would be a spring season.
Right.
And then there would probably be a rehearsal period. And very often there was a summer tour.
Okay.
Well, the pandemic tried to change that a lot.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
So I think things are getting back on schedule.
Okay,
Back on
okay.
schedule.
Tell me about Ailey 2.
Well, Ailey 2 came about when Alvin felt, because he had the school, the Alvin Ailey American Dance Center, at that time located on East 59th Street. He wanted to give an opportunity to some of the most gifted and talented dancers in the school. So he chose 12 dancers. Well, actually, he was preparing for the Duke Ellington celebration. Ailey celebrates Ellington. So he selected 12 dancers to set the ballets on before he transferred them to the first company. And because the first company was on tour. And out of that came Ailey too. He decided that to have these 12 dancers prepare for their futures in dance by learning repertory, by rehearsing, by working with choreographers, both emerging as well as seasoned choreographers, would help them grow as artists. And they would have the attention, the one-on-one attention every day, and they would be paid. Not much, they were paid a stipend. And they also performed community services where they did outreach throughout the New York City and New York State, actually. And when I started my 10 years director there, our very first performance was in a prison.
Ah,
So we were performing for those audiences who could not attend performances. They would be homes, senior citizens, homes for senior citizens, homes for those people who just really couldn't reach, get to the theaters.
now are there still 12 dancers in Ailey too, or are there more?
There's still 12
Okay.
dancers. It went up to 14 at one point.
Okay.
But cost prohibitive.
Okay. And where do they go after? How long are they with Ailey too, and where do they go afterwards?
They stayed 2 years. They auditioned for the first company. Some are chosen, some are not. Most are not. And they audition for Broadway theaters. They audition for other companies. Some become teachers. Some have already gotten their degree from the Ailey Fordham BFA program. So, and they have many more choices today. Some go into physical therapy. There are myriad things.
Okay. Now the organization has a whole education program that is beyond the principal company, beyond Ailey 2, for other people who.
Yeah, well,
Tell me
there's the
about that.
extension program for anyone who wants to dance, anyone who wants to move. They can come to the Ailey School, take classes in ballet, in modern, in samba, in, oh my gosh, there are any number of dance disciplines they can take class in. And they don't have to be professional.
Yeah, yeah.
And those are very popular classes. And then, of course, there's a large children's program, starting with First Steps when they're 3 years old, and then there's bounding boys and athletic boys, and there's a teenage division, and up they go, up the ladder.
So you worked with Alvin Ailey for more than 40 years.
Yeah.
Describe the Alvin Ailey that you knew.
I always think of Alvin as extraordinarily generous, a wonderful listener. He loved people. He always wanted to hear what you felt, what you thought. When he was choreographing, he really felt you were the only dancer in the room at times, even if it was a group work. Very personable, great sense of humor. He would tell the same joke over and over and laugh at it. He would, but he loved people. And he was always interested in what one was feeling, what was thinking. And he encouraged us always to, he said, dancers, you can't just eat, sleep, and drink dance. You have to read. You have to go to museums. You have to explore other types of theater and music. And when we travel, you have to go and see, the wonderful treasures and the culture, and taste the foods and the smells and know the people of that particular place, because that way you experience life.
Right.
You bring life to what you do. You bring life to my steps.
And I would imagine that that was one of the reasons for the connection with Fordham, for the dancers to be able to have an education beyond just dance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because I had gone to Juilliard, and I graduated Juilliard before I started dancing with any companies.
He was also amazingly prolific. He created about 80.
79 ballets.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And I've often marveled at how he was able to take this company from appearing at the 92nd Street Y in 1958 to the huge program that it is now.
Kind of like an accordion.
Right, with that amazing building on 55th Street and with all of the programs. He must have been, in addition to being very talented, he must have been quite a salesman.
Well, he wanted dancers that could really do everything. He was a very hybrid choreographer. That is, he choreographed, his background was Lester Horton, technique, but he also studied classical ballet. He knew the importance of classical ballet in building a dancer and building an artist, as well as the modern dance disciplines. So he wanted all of those things in that one dancer's body, all of those elements, all those techniques. I mean, he loved an arabesque as much as he loved a contraction. Mm-hmm. And that's the way he choreographed. And his vision was, he used to say, I want a dancer with a modern top and a ballet bottom. He wanted that articulation in the legs and feet, and he wanted that suppleness in the upper body. He wanted all of that.
The posters of the different company seasons that you see in the exhibit, and which really captures the beauty of the Alvin Ailey dancers in motion.
Yes.
And you know, what I see are dancers who are, there's a sensuousness, they're quick, they're strong, very strong, and you get the energy and you get raw emotion, I think.
Yes, emotion is, yes, he was very much about emotion. He encouraged you to bring yourself to the movement. You know, the steps didn't mean anything unless you made something of them. He encouraged you to very often use your experiences to bring that energy to the movement. And because he'd been an actor at
I didn't
one
know that.
time. Yes. When he left House of Flowers, he did 2 Broadway shows. Let's see, Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright was one. I never saw him, unfortunately, perform on Broadway. I didn't know about Broadway at that time.
Okay.
And, but he decided that dance really was what he wanted to do, and to choreograph was what he wanted to do. And feeling was very, very important. Emotions were very important. Layering of the movement.
Now you are working on your own, a video series, an 8-part video series about Alvin Ailey called Portrait of Ailey. Tell me about that series.
The genesis of that was in working in the archives. I was reading a lot about Alvin. I had been his executor when he passed. So I had read through his diaries and journals, and I was reading and listening to interviews and hearing his voice, and it was a very emotional experience for me. And as I was in the elevator with a lot of young students, it occurred to me that as enthusiastic as they were to be in this wonderful building, the Ailey School, the Joan Weil Center for Dance, they never knew him, never heard his voice, never saw him dance. And I thought in archives, well, if we have this material, why don't I put it together and make it possible for them to get to know Alvin and why they're there?
It's amazing, what his artistic legacy is, and in terms of his dance, but also what he created, and the influence that his company has had culturally. What were his? Do you have a sense of what his struggles were?
Money, survival of a company, having a board that believed in him and that would support his vision and what he wanted to do, have dancers appreciate themselves and their self-esteem is important to him, and to really keep that relevance to the public. And he particularly wanted to get black people in the theater. That was a consistent frustration.
Yeah. Well, really?
Yeah, yeah.
You see a lot of them now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, over the years, yeah. It happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's interesting.
But his struggles, I think he wanted a life like everyone else, but he was so entrenched in this life of producing and constantly, so at the beginning, he did everything himself. He did his own press notices, he did, all of that. He didn't have a secretary. He didn't have this behemoth of an organization that's there now.
Right.
With development people and PR people and, all of these programs in the school. He built all of this because he had to convince people how important and necessary and how essential they were, not just to his vision, but to our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would think that the passion he felt about that would help in his efforts to raise support for the company. Edges of Ailey highlights through many media, painting, sculpture, film, Alvin Ailey's journals and correspondence helped to illuminate what the different influences were on the company. And religion was certainly one.
Yes.
As you can see in pieces like Revelations.
Sure.
And different kinds of black music, whether it was jazz or gospel.
Or even the classical composers.
Yeah.
Classical composers.
Definitely. How about Africa? Was that a
Very
influence?
much so. Very much so. Yes.
And I would think his own experience as somebody who grew up in the South, started out in Texas. I remember seeing at the exhibit, there's a video, it's a pan of a cotton field.
Yeah.
And just a cotton field, and it extends wider.
And there's a certain tranquility in that. Yeah.
Right.
Well, his mother picked cotton, and he was right along there with her, but he was too small.
Right.
Really, to do a good job picking cotton.
Right.
But these were his blood memories.
Right.
This is,
Right.
where it started.
Yeah.
And I met Lula Cooper. I knew her. And she talks about it and the kind of child he was. He was very bright, very smart. And when he got interested in dance, she maybe didn't understand it all, but she supported it.
Yeah.
She and his stepfather, Fred. Yeah.
Well, the Alvin Ailey legacy is very great, and thank you for sharing what you learned about it personally. I'm afraid we're out of time. I'd like to thank Sylvia Waters, the Artistic Director Emerita of Ailey II, for joining me today. You can visit Edges of Ailey at the Whitney Museum from now through February 9th. And you can watch the first 4 episodes of the documentary Portrait of Ailey free on PBS Learning Media. To learn about our upcoming shows, you can follow us on Instagram at one-to-one CUNY TV. And you can now watch the show on the go by downloading the CUNY TV app. For the City University of New York and One to One, I'm Cheryl McCarthy.